ever sees me, I'm losing every battle. No one ever sees me, I'm losing every battle. No one ever sees me, I'm losing every battle. Can somebody save me, I'm losing every battle.
Good morning, friends. Broadcasting from my studio in Salt Lake City, Utah. For The Artist's Voice, this is Jerry Hardesty. I'm the host and producer of the show, and I empower artists to share their stories and talk about their art. In the past, as I've said before, you have only been able to listen to the podcast, but now not only can you listen, you can also watch as we are streaming live through StreamYard on Facebook and YouTube. And you can even make comments. In fact, I encourage you to drop your name in the comments and tell us where you're from. If you're listening, obviously, if you're listening and watching. You may even ask a question of the artist while the interview's happening, if you so choose. So if you miss this show, you can watch it almost immediately. It will be recorded. All that being said, I want to bring on my guest for today's show. Jerrin Wagstaff is a professional artist as well as an art instructor. Originally from California, he now resides in Salt Lake City, Utah, and teaches at Brigham Young University. Welcome, Jerrin.
Hey, good morning, Jerry.
Good morning. How's it going?
Good. Yeah, how about you?
Doing good. Good as well.
Nice.
So you got plans for next week for Thanksgiving?
Yeah, we're going to keep it pretty low key. Just going to hang around with probably my parents and my kids, and that's about it. One of my brothers might show up, but we'll kind of see with the social distancing and all of that. What makes sense, I guess. Well, yeah, how about you? Are you hanging around or?
Well, yes, we are. It's just my wife and I. Our youngest son may join us, but we don't know about that yet, so he hasn't made up his mind. I don't know if it's COVID or some other reason. You never know.
Yeah, it's probably COVID.
Yeah, probably. Well, most artists need a day job to pay their bills, and I assume your day job is teaching at BYU. What are your challenges as a teacher when your passion is perhaps your own studio practice?
Well, I think with teaching, it kind of has to be one of those things that you enjoy. Otherwise, I think there are probably easier ways to make money than to be teaching. But I think that one of the things that really helped me out was when I first graduated with my MFA and started teaching, being forced to kind of verbalize the art process to other people who weren't as familiar with it as I was, definitely helped me get some things straight in my mind as far as what I was doing. And I think that sort of continued throughout my experience as an educator, is that idea of having to verbalize, having to research, gathering ideas from the students, and having that interaction. And so I think that it does, in a way, play into my studio practice. I mean, of course, I think for most artists, ideally we'd be in the studio 7 days a week, as much as we ever wanted. But I think you kind of find ways to make your day job or teaching or whatever it is that you're doing, at least inform or feed your practice in the studio. So when you get there, you're full of ideas and ready to go. So that's been helpful to me as I've been teaching for the last 12 years or so.
So what are your teaching responsibilities, by the way?
Well, right now I'm an adjunct instructor at BYU, and I did teach at several community colleges and universities in an adjunct capacity in Southern California as well. So I've never been in the real kind of full-time tenure track position, which, from what I understand, has a lot more, responsibilities outside of the classroom, and
Yeah.
it's something that I've kind of shot for, but I think if the timing's right and the right opportunity comes along, I might be interested. But the nice thing about being an adjunct is you kind of focus, exclusively on teaching, and that's kind of where my responsibilities have been.
Well, what kind of classes do you teach? Painting or what?
Painting, drawing, two-dimensional design are kind of the big ones. I've taught mixed media at BYU before. Back when I first started teaching, if they asked me if I could teach a class, I would just say yes and figure it out. So
Of course.
I've taught a few art history classes that I probably wasn't, entirely qualified for, but they worked out, and I did my research and they were fine. But yeah, primarily painting and drawing is kind of the big ones, and then I really like two-dimensional design as well. Color theory, another one. Yeah.
Color theory would be very challenging, I would think. But are your students mostly art majors, or are they?
At BYU they are, but when I was teaching at community colleges, I would say 95% were not. So, I think that at that stage, if you're teaching freshmen or sophomores, it's an age demographic, and it's also an experience bracket where, you have your art majors who are probably more committed, in terms of, really diving into the projects. But I kind of found that, at that particular stage, whether they're art majors or not, there is a kind of a steep learning curve. And, I've really enjoyed teaching both. I mean, I think, with the art majors, there's a certain dedication and excitement about it, which is great. And then, for a non-art major, what I'm trying to do is to make sure that they have a great experience and enjoy art and can talk intelligently about it. And then, hopefully they make more money than me at some point and start buying paintings,
Oh, yay.
Enjoy they have a good experience and, can become connected to the art world for sure.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, I think I don't know how you feel, but I think it's a sad commentary, the state of arts in America, where, we don't support, or our government doesn't support. We don't have the support that they have in many other countries. So what do you think, or do you have an opinion, what needs to change so artists don't have to have a day job?
I don't know. I mean, that's a complicated question.
Yeah,
I mean,
sorry to throw that at you.
No. I think, I'm not a business guy, and so I'm coming at this with my experience in education and art. So you got to take it for what it's worth. But I would like to see, obviously more support in education for art. I think that one of the things about maybe our economy is that it places value on certain careers, on certain products and things. And I think if more people were more familiar and excited about the arts, I think that there'd probably be more people putting their resources into it. And so I think maybe more, I don't know if we can say mandatory classes in high school, or maybe even into college. But I kind of think if you don't pursue art as a career, or pursue art in education, your knowledge of what's going on in art probably ends with Van Gogh and Monet. And so, there's a lot that's happened in the last 130 years or so, and a lot of it's really, really great. Yeah, you might hear about Picasso, or something, but yeah, I mean, I think that getting people up to speed with more contemporary art, making it maybe a little bit more accessible. I mean, I think, because most artists have kind of gone through that career path. We talk about art in a certain way that's maybe intimidating to, people who have not had the same education as we do about the art. So I think maybe we could make it more accessible, and invite people that aren't, typically interested in seeing art to be a part of that, and, not making it an uncomfortable or, embarrassing situation where they feel like they're not part of the club or, can't understand what we're talking about.
Now, you mentioned the fact that you're not a business person. However, don't you believe that our art education is lacking in business skills, business education?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I got my BFA from BYU, and then my master's degree from California State University, Long Beach. And in both programs, I did have a 1 semester class on business practices for artists. So it wasn't like it was never addressed, but it probably could have been a little bit more like every semester you're taking a business practices class, and
exactly,
preparing you that way. And I say I'm not a business person just in terms of, kind of understanding maybe the perspective of business. But I'm really trying to work out that side of my professional practice, so that at least if the art can pay for itself, I feel like that's a victory. So I'm trying to kind of get there, and I'm definitely trying to do better. So I understand that it's part of the game, and it's important. But I think it's something that you kind of learn as you go a little bit.
How much time do you feel that you spend marketing your own work as opposed to your teaching and your what was I going to say? Well, your creativity time.
I would say, I mean, it's probably about a third each. I mean,
okay,
not just. I mean, it's probably varies from week to week, of course, but
sure.
But I mean, I think, with me teaching 1 to 2 classes, it's definitely not like a full load or a full-time job. I get in the studio probably 3 or 4 times a week, for maybe 3 or 4 hour blocks at a time. And then I'm kind of trying to do something a little bit every day, in terms of business practices, whether it's, promoting stuff on Instagram, or, updating my website, or, researching and applying for, shows or grants or fellowships. So I'm kind of trying to do all 3, as it makes sense. But I would say probably on average, it's probably about an equal amount of time for each of those 3 things.
How do you feel? We're in this age of technology, obviously. How do you feel about virtual shows rather than brick and mortars, or vice versa?
Well, I think it's I think that probably the pandemic has accelerated maybe a shift to online exhibitions. I mean, I've been showing a little bit with this gallery called Another Year in LA that's based in Los Angeles for a while, and they converted to an online format and online exhibitions, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I want to say. So they're maybe a little bit ahead of the curve. And
sure.
I know that, I don't know that necessarily that format's been looked down upon, but it maybe not taken quite as seriously as like a brick and mortar show, like you were saying. But I think during the pandemic, I mean, everybody's kind of following Another Year in LA's lead a little bit in terms of converting to online, these virtual shows. I mean, I've been to art openings that are Zoom calls, with 60 or 100 people, and it's cool. And so I think that, I think in that aspect, I think it's been great, because, I think that there are just certain realities about where you can live and be an artist. And, I think that New York and Los Angeles are obviously kind of the big ones, but, having lived in Los Angeles or in, the Los Angeles area for 12 years, I mean, I can tell you it's a real grind, and it's very, very difficult to make enough money to, have normal things like a family or, food, and still, really, get into your art practice. So I think that, you know, having things available online, you know, maybe frees things up for artists a little bit, but I still think, you know, we are making physical objects. I mean, in my opinion, my paintings are better in person than online. I mean, I
Of
try to make them
course.
look good.
Yes.
But you know, so I don't think it can totally like supplant, you know, seeing the art in person. But I do like that it gives artists more opportunities to have their work seen by
Yes.
more people.
Yeah. And I think the virtual exhibitions are gaining more popularity during this pandemic, obviously.
Sure.
We don't have a lot of choices.
Right, right. And I mean, I've been maybe a little bit more disciplined about applying for shows and things over the last, you know, couple of months. And almost every single exhibition I'm applying for right now has an online or virtual component. So
Uh-huh.
you know, so I don't think it'll erase the you know, the in-person shows, but I think it's going to become more and more of like, you know, we're doing it in person and online,
Uh-huh.
which I think is great.
Well, just for your information, and not to get completely off track here, because I want to come back to your own studio practice. You are a painter, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. I want to come back to your own studio practice, but I've interviewed over 80 artists for the Artist's Voice. So I am in the process of curating a show, having those artists submit their work if they so desire, called Diverse Voices. Originally, I was going to use a venue here in Salt Lake City, but you know, 75% of my artists are from outside of Salt Lake, so they would have to pay for
Right.
shipping to and from. So we're going to go to a virtual show, and I've had to cancel that show here in Salt Lake City a couple of times. So I want to go to a virtual show simply to get it off the ground. So if you were interested in that, I would be happy to have you participate.
Oh, absolutely.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. I'd love to be included for sure.
I'm charging a $20 fee, and that's simply because I'm going to have some expenses with,
Yeah,
Zoom and having a virtual space to
of
show it
course.
in and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah,
if
no,
that's
understandable. Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I'd be excited to be a
great,
part of it for sure.
great, thanks. I'll put you on the list, Jerrin.
Okay, great.
Well, now take us into your studio and describe your own process of how you approach your studio practice. What's your focus? What inspires you? How do you approach a new painting? What's your media and your favorite tools? Now I've thrown a lot there, so
Yeah, talking about
if you can
I think one of
remember all
those takes a while. Yeah,
that.
no, yeah, I'll kind of just start with just kind of the where I kind of begin the creative process, and then you can ask me questions or we can elaborate or whatever.
Of course.
Kind of go from there. But I think I've kind of always been a collector of imagery, and I don't think that that's really a unique practice. But I mean, I remember even in like junior high or high school, cutting out images from like sports magazines, from music magazines, and kind of like plastering my wall with them. So like I had these like montages of like like hundreds of photos all over my room, and didn't really seem weird to me, but like I haven't really seen too many other people's rooms that look like that. But I think that that there's kind of an impetus for me to collect imagery, and so maybe over the last 5 years or so, I've been kind of in this like gathering stage where I have and with the computer, I mean it's phenomenal. You can get as many images as
Mm-hmm.
you want from as many different sources, like from the entire history of the world. So it's kind of a really exciting time, to kind of be in that mode of gathering imagery. So that's kind of where it starts. And then, kind of as I start to see themes emerge, from those images, or things that are, visually interesting to paint, but also conceptually interesting to me, those kind of work their way up to the top in terms of a hierarchy. And I kind of have this, kind of group at the top of imagery that, I pull from to make paintings from. So that's kind of where it starts. And I had a recent exhibition at Knox Contemporary Gallery here in Salt Lake, and the show also ran at another year in LA, in Los Angeles, and kind of the theme that came from these images and things that I was collecting was the idea of having your attention spread across so many different, subjects and images and, information, news, all that stuff. And so, I kind of I had a hard time really kind of like narrowing it down into one category, as I was kind of selecting these images. There were so many things I wanted to paint. But it kind of came about that, when I looked at them as a group, it was kind of more about the overall experience of living, in, the year 2020 with so many different sources and images and, people and things vying for our attention all the time. And so it's kind of a hodgepodge or a collection of imagery. And I think that, on a larger scale, it talks about, how difficult it is to, focus. I think I read about this high school debate tactic for policy debaters where essentially they're given, I don't know. I don't know the rules of it. I think it's like 3 to 5 minutes or something where they basically introduce arguments to their opponent. And so their opponent, by the rules of the debate, has to respond to all of the questions raised. And they've come up with this tactic called spreading, where essentially these kids learn how to speak like at 400 words a minute. It's crazy. Like if you YouTube this, it's crazy. Like I can't even understand what they're saying. But they essentially like introduce like 40 topics in like 3 minutes, and your opponent gets penalized for not, being able to respond to all of your topics. So
kind of like all the questions I just threw at you at once.
yeah, a little bit. But I think that, kind of the way that we engage news and information and, all of these from all these platforms on a daily basis, it has that feel of being spread, because I think that, of all of those paintings and all the topics I was trying to engage, I was interested in all of them, but it was so hard to give like a really thoughtful response to any single one of them because there were so many things on the table to work from. So as an overarching theme, I think that that's kind of what came from it. And then of course, with the individual paintings, there are, individual subjects and things that I'm also really interested in as well.
So by spreading, we've had a lot of distractions this year, obviously.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
But by spreading yourself through all these images, are you spreading yourself thin?
I think so. I mean, I think, yeah, absolutely. I think everybody, like, I don't know. It seems like we're all spread pretty thin
Yes.
with all the things that we're trying to navigate and deal with, and all these things vying for our attention. So I think it takes a real conscious effort to really focus and dive into one thing that you're passionate about or want to become more knowledgeable about, or without having that attention being taken away from you. And so yeah, I mean, I do think that's probably a source of a lot of anxiety for people, and
it is,
and especially when you have something like a pandemic that throws a whole other layer into everything. I mean,
and an election.
Yeah, absolutely. These are wild times, and there's a lot going on, and it's it's hard to keep up with it. And yeah, I think at least from my experience, I feel like I've been spread thin for quite a while.
I understand. Lately, I've been spending about 80% of my time marketing rather than creating it. So
yeah,
that can be frustrating. Well, what are you working on right now?
Well, I think kind of after my show went up in February of this year, and so we had an opening, and then the pandemic happened, and I mean the entire United States, the world kind of ground to a halt, really.
Yeah.
And so I was a little bit frustrated just because I felt like I'd kind of like gotten to like a cruising altitude with the work. I felt like
you got cheated.
Yeah. I felt like I had maybe like 50 more paintings, like just ready to go. Like I was just ready to make them and just kind of, assembly line this thing. And just, I was kind of in a real nice groove, I felt, with my studio practice and everything else. And so, of course, when, I have 3 kids. And so when they had to come home and do online learning for the last, 3 months of their school year, and then of course this year as well, it kind of really changed my availability for the studio and changed how I was, thinking about and doing my work. And so I think, it's given me time to kind of maybe process some of the ideas that I was working with in the exhibition. I think that, still kind of in the process of collecting a lot of imagery. But I think that, just kind of given the events, I mean, for social justice, for the election, for the pandemic, I mean, these are big things. And so, I think I'm kind of narrowing down my topics a little bit more than I was before. And I'm kind of focusing maybe a little bit more upon American mythologies and, kind of things that we think about in terms of like what it is to be an American and, what we expect from our experience as Americans.
Well, when Picasso died, it's said that he had 45,000 unsold paintings.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
No, that's in his biography. That's in one of his biography, not an autobiography, but a biography. Well, it wouldn't be an autobiography, would it?
Yeah, probably not. After
he couldn't write about it from the grave. But anyway, he had 45,000 unsold paintings. So, do you have a large inventory of unsold work?
I guess. I mean, nothing like that, of course.
Of course, no.
But I mean, you kind of asked about my process a little bit in terms of painting, and I do a lot of kind of alla prima painting. Just all kind of my approach, especially with my smaller painting, is that I do try to get them kind of done in one shot. And again, it has to do with a lot of things about the time that I have, but also just my sensibilities as a painter and drawer and all of that. So, so I would say that I probably throw away more paintings than I keep. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so, I do, but that's painful.
Yeah, you have to kind of get over. Well, I have to get over it. But, it's kind of one of those things where I'm getting better. I hope I get better my whole life. But at the ratio of things that I think work versus things that don't. And so, for me, taking the time to go back and fuss over a painting and try to correct it, it kind of takes the energy and the life out of it for me. So I'd rather just try to make the painting again from scratch than to, try to like mess with a painting for a long period of time, if that makes sense. So, so I keep the ones that I like. And I do have, a storage unit full of paintings, that I do like, and that, have kind of been from different shows and exhibitions I've had over the past. But as far as like a vast catalog of, unsold work, probably nowhere near Picasso, obviously, but I definitely have like a pretty full storage unit of stuff that I made.
Well, it was said in the biography that he painted it until he filled a studio or a house, and then he'd go buy another studio or house and paint until he filled it up. So yeah.
Must be nice, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, goals we're shooting for, I guess.
So let's see, acrylic or oil?
Oil for me. Yeah.
Really? Oh, okay.
Yeah. I've tried acrylic, and I think it does really well for some things that I've used it for in the past, but with the kind of the style and approach that I'm taking to painting right now, oil for me is what's working best. And I know that there are things that you can do to kind of make acrylic behave like oil, and I've met a few people who've kind of like figured it out. But for me, like especially kind of trying to complete these paintings in 4 to 6 hour sessions, it's like I need that paint open and active the whole time, and I don't want to consistently be battling the acrylic as it's drying and all of that. So it's working better for me right now.
Don't you have more problems with the oil drying, or have you learned techniques to speed that drying process up?
Well, I mean, since I'm not really going back into the paintings too much, it doesn't bother me if it takes them a while to dry. So I just kind of, have drying paintings all over my studio, and, within a week or so, you can kind of move them around, but like, obviously you don't want to like stack them or do anything crazy, but yeah, I don't really have too much trouble with, the longer drying time with oil.
Have you ever used, I've interviewed a number of people and I've learned different techniques from different people about the drying process. And there was one New York artist who uses a product, I think Mel something. I can't remember the total name of. I could grab it and tell you what it is. And another one or two or three that I've interviewed uses kerosene, and it dries.
Oh,
it dries almost immediately. But you have
that
those.
sounds interesting.
It is interesting, but you have those fumes, and of course, I don't know. Do you work on an easel or do you work flat?
I typically work on an easel.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm not super interested in the fumes like that. I want to stay healthy, but
Of course. Well, I did. Go ahead. I'm sorry. No.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I use Gamsol, so it's like it's an odorless mineral spirit, and I use it really sparingly. I really don't use that much of it. And I use kind of like it's called Velasquez medium. It's from a company called Natural Pigments. And or is it no, it's Natural Pigments that makes the medium, and then they sell Rublev paints. But that's been a really good one, and I'll kind of, it's more of like an impasto type thing, and it dries pretty well, and I think it's kind of solvent free, so it has mostly like, I think it's like silica and like refined linseed oil or something, and then you can kind of thin it a little bit with some Gamsol or maybe a little bit more of the linseed oil, but that's kind of the recipe I'm using right now. But I've used like Liquin and some other stuff before.
I like Liquin.
Yeah, but I try to keep the toxic stuff, out if I can.
I try to do that in the garage.
There you go. Yeah, for sure.
But now with cold weather, I can't paint in the garage. I have to paint inside. But I forgot what I was going to ask. It'll come back to me. But we've got a comment here from your studio mate, Kathleen Beltran.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah, she says wonderful questions and clear, interesting answers. Very, very nice. She's giving both of us compliments there.
I appreciate that.
She says, I am in the workshop with Jerrin and loved learning more from him. Very nice.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been, there's a workshop with an artist in Los Angeles named Kimberly Brooks. She's amazing and talented, and she's kind of invented, or I guess created these courses. So she has kind of different levels of courses, and Kathleen and I have been working together with her for a while now, and kind of following some of those same practices. Kimberly Brooks has a book out there that's going to come out on kind of solvent-free practices and the history of painting, and it's really terrific. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun to work with that group, and especially Kathleen. Thanks for watching. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thanks, Kathleen. Well, what's the name of that book that's coming out? Do you know? Is it titled yet?
Oh, geez. I don't want to mess it up.
What was her name again?
It's Kimberly Brooks. And I have it over there somewhere.
That's okay.
But she'll, I can maybe post it in the comments later or something.
Please do.
Yeah.
Bricks. How do you spell Bricks?
Brooks.
Oh, Brooks. I'm hearing Bricks.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Brooks. Got it.
Maybe Kathleen knows the title off the top of her head. I don't know. You throw it in the comments.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Would it be a fair assumption to say that your work tends to be from outside yourself rather than introspective or emotional?
Yes, I think that's fair to say. I know that, again, I think, being an artist is kind of a process of self-discovery, I guess, in terms of, not just what's important to you, but also just, like, what is your creative process? Because I know a lot of people who, can paint from the inside out. I mean, I did abstract painting for quite a while in Southern California. And for me, I always had to have external references. So it was more based in the Southern California landscape. And I would use photo images and drawings that I did as kind of a way to combine and, kind of make these new forms. But, as far as just really painting my feelings or, kind of digging down and kind of just letting things internal out onto the canvas. Never been good at that. Like, I don't know what it is. So, it does feel, like as you paint longer and longer, it's almost this process of elimination of like getting rid of things that, you don't do well or that aren't interesting to you, but you kind of can't know until you try, a lot of the times. And so for me, I think, responding to external images or source material has always been a really big and important part for me.
But you say you tried abstract painting for a short time, but doesn't a lot of your work have abstract qualities?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that, I guess in my mind, since I'm kind of working with, visual imagery that's recognizable, or photographs, or observation, or whatever it is, to me, it always feels representational because I'm looking at something and responding. But I think the important part of that is that, the paintings are more of a response to the image as opposed to a replication of the image, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
So I think that, those abstract elements, are part of my response to the image. So, whether that's dialing into something that's, that a detailed area, or leaving an area really kind of understated with a lot of, brushwork that maybe feels abstract. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say there are abstract elements to it, but, in my mind, abstraction feels like something different to me. When people just say abstraction,
Yes.
like I wouldn't classify myself that way, but I definitely have people say that they like the abstract quality of my paintings quite a bit. So I totally get it. And that makes sense, like what you're asking.
It does, but there's obviously different types of abstract paintings.
Sure.
I mean, there are those that have that are partially representational. There's abstract that everything's distorted.
Yep.
So there's that. There's an abstract expressionism. So there's various types. But anyway.
Yeah.
Moving on. Well, many of the pieces on your website are fairly small. Do you consider these to be studies for larger works, or do they stand alone? And how do you find painting small canvases versus large ones?
I've always kind of painted on the smaller side, and I think that it probably has to do maybe a little bit with that sort of alla prima or one shot approach to making them. There's just certain logistics when it comes down to, covering a certain, square footage, in an allotted amount of time. But I don't know. I mean, I think to answer your question, I think the small paintings do stand on their own.
Okay.
I kind of rarely do small paintings in preparations for larger ones. I kind of feel that, when I have done that in the past, I don't know that much has been gained, from me doing that. So I won't do like a whole bunch of studies and, then make a big one.
Yeah.
But in on the website, I think there are maybe 5 larger paintings. And when I say larger, I'm talking like 4 by 4 feet to maybe 5 by 6 feet, I think. And so those were part of the exhibition I had in February, and those were the biggest paintings I've ever done. And it was different because I did have to complete them in sessions. So, it's kind of like I'd work, the background to foreground, kind of like a traditional approach to it. But I tried to maintain the freshness of the paint and sort of that direct approach, throughout the different sessions. And, I think it is a challenge, just because, a lot of times when I'm working on those smaller ones, it's intuitive. It's, kind of all done in one day. So you're in kind of a certain headspace, I guess, the whole time. And, some of it's based on intuition. And so, kind of going back to a larger painting over and over again, it's kind of like trying to step into the same river twice. It's kind of like almost impossible, to be in the same mindset and the same energy level and all of that. So I'm still kind of trying to figure out the big ones. But I think that they're important. I do really like how they turned out. And so while they may not have some of the same qualities that I really like about the small ones, I'm kind of confident that eventually I'll work that out. And I mean, I did some reading about Cy Twombly, the abstract expressionist, and from what I understand, he would, his paintings are quite large, maybe 10 by 15 feet or bigger in some cases. But from what I understand, he would go into the studio and kind of lock himself in there for like 3 or 4 days and just execute these paintings, these large paintings in one shot. And I mean, you can see the quality of his mark and the intuition and the directness of it. All of those are things that I'm, interested in. And so maybe, when my kids are grown, or maybe if I can get a babysitter for 3 days, I can lock myself in the studio and try to hammer out some really big paintings in one shot. But, it's kind of on the horizon, but I'm kind of not quite there yet. But I do think the small ones are important, and I would like to replicate what I'm doing on a small scale on a larger scale eventually.
There you go. Well, speaking of Cy Twombly, have you read his that biography by a Salt Lake City author called Chalk?
Oh no, I haven't.
Well, you need read it. Read it.
Okay.
He lives on the avenues. His wife teaches. I think she teaches philosophy for the U.
Okay.
And I interviewed him for the podcast. I think it's episode 20 or 21.
Okay.
So it's very interesting. So read it. It's Chalk, Chalk.
Okay, Chalk, and it's a biography on Cy Twombly?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'd love to dig into that. That sounds great. Thank you.
So is there any one alla prima painter that you studied that you perhaps emulate?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think probably the painter that I maybe most identify with, that's maybe more contemporary in that way, is maybe like Elizabeth Peyton. I don't know if you're familiar with her work, but she's still alive and making work, and I think she kind of rose to prominence in the early 2000s, maybe late 90s. But she was doing kind of paintings and drawings that are really loose and fresh, and working from some pop culture images like I like to do, but they were kind of more like celebrities. I think, not that our paintings are the same, but when I look at her paintings, I kind of feel like I get what she's trying to do. And, I kind of feel like we have maybe similar approaches to our style of painting.
How about Schmidt? I can't remember his first name.
Schmidt. What time period are we talking about?
You would
contemporary, or I don't know. Yeah, I'm not familiar. I don't know.
He's written a book called Alla Prima.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay. Yeah, I'll check it out. Yeah. I feel like the art world's so vast. It's like
it is.
It's so hard to like find you can't know everything about everyone. But
and you can't read every single book,
and that's why I like having these conversations, is that, it's like you bring your set of knowledge, I bring mine, and we kind of find these common grounds. And now I have 2 new books I'm going to go read. So it's great.
Are you going to buy them? Are you going to I get in trouble for buying. I get in trouble for buying too many books.
I do. Yeah. I mean, I probably have 20 or 30 books I bought from Amazon this year that I haven't even touched yet. It's like I like the idea of reading them more than I actually like reading them.
Oh, I think I understand. I understand, and my wife will attest to that. I like to have some books beside every place that I sit in my house.
Yeah.
So if I get bored, I can pick one up, and
sure.
Therefore I have a number of books that I'll read part of it and then put it down and go to something else.
Yeah, I think I have 5 or 6 of them where it's like I'll read a page or 2 a day, and it's like, So instead of like diving in and like really getting stuff done.
We got a lot in common here.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, let's see. Yes. In some of your pieces that's on your website, I noticed that you have represented some sports figures. Are you an athlete yourself?
I really, really liked sports in high school. And I think if I would have had maybe different genetics, that's probably the course I would have pursued. I'm not particularly tall or fast or strong, which are all things that are helpful when you're trying to be a professional athlete. But no, I mean, I really like sports. Growing up, I played soccer quite a bit. Our family did a lot of skiing. I like to play golf still. And then I really like to watch sports as a spectator. And mostly, there's so much of it now on TV that it's like hard to really like, again, focus on one thing or another. But I kind of pay attention, to everything enough to know what's going on come playoff time. And then I just really like watching the playoffs in whatever sport. So, so that's kind of, so sports has been something that I've really enjoyed, throughout my life for sure.
Tennis?
I did play tennis a little bit in junior high into high school. And my kids and I play a little bit here and there, but definitely not very good at it, but it's fun.
Have you ever been to a professional open like US Open or the one in Indian Wells?
No, I've wanted to go see them in person. I do watch like the major tennis tournaments every year. And I mean, what those athletes are capable of on the court, I just can't believe. I mean,
it's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
And the strength that they have.
Oh my gosh.
Especially in their legs. They're so muscular.
Yeah. Well, and again, genetics, like you talk about it.
Yeah.
Like Novak Djokovic, and they're like, what, 6'2" or 3", and just lean and strong. It's like, oh my gosh, these guys are just incredible athletes. And in fact, one of the paintings in there is of Bethany Maddox-Sands, who's a tennis player. Yeah, so she's kind of a source of inspiration for one of the paintings.
Yeah. Okay. You need. Let's see. Serena.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That would make a good painting. And then I also noticed. Let's see. Well, I guess I didn't write it down. Didn't you have some painting with soccer fans? It was kind of the red one.
Yeah. So that one's maybe a little bit different, just in terms. I mean, it's of a, I guess in quotations, an athletic event, but the source images from that came from this YouTube video that a friend of mine showed me maybe 5 or 6 years ago. It's a North Korean news broadcast where they're essentially reporting that their national soccer team had won the World Cup in soccer against Brazil, which they did not. So it's this really weird, kind of sequence of highlights where it's clearly been, chopped up, altered, and then they have these same like maybe 20 fans just kind of dressed up in their North Korean colors with their flags, and like every time they do something good in the highlights, they kind of cut over to these fake fans that are kind of like cheering and excited. And so so I thought that, I mean, seeing it from our perspective, it seemed really funny at the time. But then, maybe as soon as, Donald Trump started running for office and started using terms like fake news, it stopped being funny really fast.
It held,
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I don't think hopefully we're not like in the same sort of like, state sponsored news propaganda that North Korea is. But, I thought that idea of fake soccer highlights and kind of these staged realities was a really kind of interesting way to talk about some of the issues that are facing us as a nation.
Now here's a challenge. How about a fake rally? Ooh.
Fake rally. Hey, I don't know.
Anyway, I did like that red painting. That was awesome.
Thanks. So. Yeah. And again, it kind of comes down to and with a lot of my work, I think that there are a lot of images that I'd like to paint that maybe conceptually aren't interesting enough for me to really engage, and there are other ones that are conceptually really interesting, but I don't really want to paint them. But that one for me, and again, what I kind of try to do with my practice is have layers of entry and layers of dialogue that you can kind of talk about when you look at it.
As we just did.
For sure.
Well, what's your least favorite chore about being an artist?
I don't know if it's a chore, but maybe it's the guilt of not working.
Okay.
Like there's I mean, it's been this way since I was in college. I mean, you always feel like you should be painting, or at least I do. You know what I mean? And so, whether you're on vacation and you bring your sketchbook and think that you're going to draw the whole time, but don't draw once, or, whether you're, taking the family on vacation and feel like you should be in the studio. I mean, there is this like kind of gnawing sense of guilt, that's kind of there all the time. And you just kind of have to learn how to deal with it, I think.
Yeah, but when you take that sketchbook and if you start sketching, isn't there another form of guilt that you have?
Exactly. That's it. Yeah, exactly. Well, and then the other thing is that I'd hate being interrupted when I'm kind of in that process, and so so it's like one of those things where it's like I kind of already know, if I'm not like in the studio by myself, I just shouldn't even get it out because my 3 kids. It's hard to watch a 3-minute YouTube video without being asked some sort of question, which is fine. I mean, they're great, but to like kind of be engaged in a creative process with them around, it's just better not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, if you could meet a famous artist over a meal, who would that be?
Ooh, a famous artist over a meal. That's a good question.
Or before one of his pieces, one of his artworks in a museum or an exhibition.
I'll tell you probably the best exhibition I ever saw in person. So I'd like to have dinner with this artist for sure. So is probably Cecily Brown. She had a show in 2013 at Gagosian Gallery in Los Angeles. And at the time, I was living outside of the city, so I was living in Corona, so it was maybe like a 2-hour drive to get there. And so I made the trip down, and I spent probably at least 2 hours in that show. I mean, I was just mesmerized by it. Just phenomenal paintings. And I mean, even halfway through the exhibition, I was already trying to see if I could find time in my schedule the next day to come back and see it. I was just like so excited about these paintings, and so. That was probably the best exhibition I've ever seen in person, the one that maybe inspired me or got me the most excited. So to have a meal with her, I'd love to talk painting with her, but there are plenty of other artists too that
of course. So what kind of advice do you give, or what advice do you give your students? I'm talking about the serious ones now.
Yeah, for sure. I think that it's tough. I mean, there may be certain realities about the career path as an artist that you maybe just can't understand at that age. I mean, I kind of think back to my experience as a student, and people told me it would be hard to make a living at, and that it was a difficult path. But I think when you're 21 or 22 years old, it's like, well, I'm talented. I work hard. I'll be fine. Like, I'll work it out. You know what I mean? There's a certain, I don't know if it's arrogance, but maybe combined with like being naive about some things that, you just kind of have to learn through life experience. But, so I try to, let them know that there are certain realities about being an artist, and just career wise that it's hard, but to kind of maintain that, to maintain your practice. I mean, even if you're not in the studio, you can be thinking about ideas, but really you've got to kind of be making decisions about your art on a daily basis and making stuff, even if it's 10 or 15 minutes a day. But I recently got, kind of a great piece of advice. Kathleen mentioned that workshop that we're a part of. Kimberly Brooks, the one who is the director of Brooks Art Academy, she had her mother on just like kind of one of our sessions together over Zoom, and she's a doctor of I think it's psychology, but I was kind of saying the same thing I was telling you about in terms of like the guilt of not working, and she just kind of stopped me and said, the tide comes in and the tide goes out. It's never going to stay in forever, and it's never going to be out forever. So
Are you talking about Dr. Hillis?
Her name's Carol Lewis. So
Okay.
different person, but
There's a Dr. Hillis who's a psychologist who wrote a book. And here's another book.
Okay, there you go. Yeah.
I forget the total title, and I forget her total name. I've got it here somewhere, but it's something about journey, and she relates psychology to art and intertwines them throughout the book. So it's very interesting.
Sounds like a great read.
It is.
But yeah, I mean, I think that idea of, I think that, especially kind of just given, capitalism and kind of the work ethic aspect of being in America, I think there is this sense that, you should be following this kind of like linear upward path, towards success, and, that working, daily. And I think that's an important part of it. I'm not discounting that, but maybe just kind of understanding with life and with art and creativity, there's a rhythm to it. And, there are certain times, kind of like when I was building up to that show in the spring where, you're full tilt and everything's going great. And then, you have the pandemic. So it kind of,
a roadblock.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a roadblock, but, it's not the end of things, and you kind of have to continue to work and be prepared throughout. But, being patient with that cycle of creativity, I think, is something that, I hadn't really considered before, but I thought was really profound.
Of course. Well, we've been on here about an hour. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close?
No, I really appreciate you having me on, and I think what you're doing is great. I'm kind of a newcomer to the artist's voice, but I've already listened to 3 or 4 interviews,
great.
and
thank you.
What you're doing, I think it's a great service. And you talked about earlier about what we can do to make art more valuable and to our society. And I think that this is a great thing. I mean, podcasts are a really big platform right now, and I think the more you can feature artists, give them a platform, and make them more accessible to the public, I think it's a great service. So thank you, and I really appreciate you having me on your show.
Well, thank you, Jerrin. I appreciate your time. This has been fantastic getting to know you, and maybe we'll meet up in person one of these days.
Hey, I'd like that. Yeah, for sure.
That'd be great.
Let me know about the show. I'd be happy to.
I will. I definitely will.
Part of it.
On my list and on my mailing list. So.
Okay. Perfect.
All right. Thanks, and you have a good day. Have a great Thanksgiving with your family, and stay safe.
Thanks. You too, Jerry. Appreciate it.
All right. You bet. Well, again, thanks for watching and listening, and especially thanks to Jerrin for spending time with us this morning. You can find him on his website, which is JerrinWagstaff.com. It's JerrinWagstaff.com. And I believe he's also on Instagram and Facebook. You can find the audio portion of this show on Apple Podcasts and most podcast platforms. You can also listen to the show and see some of Jerrin's art on the Artist's Voice website, which is theartistsvoice.info. That's ARTISTSVOICE.info. And watch for the next announcement for the next show on Facebook and Instagram for the date and time of the next show. In the meantime, this is Jerry Hardesty reminding you to stay safe, wear your mask, and observe social distancing. Have a great day, a great weekend, and a great Thanksgiving.